Hi guys, welcome back to Flat Water, Flat Earth. I have some really exciting stuff to show you here. So this one's a new piece. I've seen it around a few times, but I haven't been able to actually read it till now. But it's nice because it'll tie into some of the other pieces about giants that we've read about. This is this the ancestor of the American race? From the New York Journal, August 23, 1896. And the heights of all the giants whom we know of. Dispatches from Victoria, British Columbia, announced the discovery of a series of gigantic footprints in that colony. They are apparently made by a human being, and if so, it is prima facie evidence of the existence of a race of prehistoric giants on the Pacific coast. The Sunday Journal has made telegraphic inquiries concerning the discovery and has obtained many additional details. No doubt exists in the minds of those who have seen the impressions that they are of human making, but there is as yet no reliable scientific verdict on the subject. The Provincial History Society has already begun an investigation. In any case, the discovery is one of great interest. It will probably arouse a sharp discussion among archaeologists. If the prints are proved to the satisfaction of the investigators to be those of a living creature, the question will remain to be decided whether it was human or not. Anything concerning the early history of the human race arouses great and natural curiosity. One would like to know whether his prehistoric ancestors were great and terrible creatures, or small and ape-like ones. If they were small, how could they have lived almost unarmed among the huge and fierce beasts which then abounded on the earth? If there are pygmies today, compared to whom men of the bigger races are giants, why should there not have lived thousands of years ago giants compared to whom the biggest men today are pygmies? Man, the last comer on the earth, is the animal concerning whose early history least is known. The natural history of some animals can be traced for countless ages, but the bones of men are very perishable and are remarkable if they have an antiquity of 2,000 years. For these and many other reasons, the report from British Columbia deserves all possible attention. The footprints were found on the island of Victoria, near the town of Quatsino, on the west coast. Their discoverer was John L. Leeson, a storekeeper of the town and a man of intelligence. He reported his find to Captain Foote of the steamer Mischief, who repeated his account to the members of the Provincial History Society. They were satisfied of its interest and importance, and a party was sent out to make an investigation. It appears that Leeson was walking at some distance from the town when his curiosity was aroused by a strange depression in a large flat rock that lay before him. The depression at once suggested a human foot, but it was of enormous size. There was a well-marked hollow where the heel would have been, and a very faint depression indicated the arch of the foot. The ball of the big toe and the rest of the forward part of the toe were plainly to be seen. It is to be remembered that no other animal has an arched foot like that of man. Leeson immediately proceeded to measure the print and found that it was 29 inches in length. Its greatest depth was 4 inches. Fascinated by his discovery, he carefully examined the vicinity. At first he saw nothing which he could connect with the print, but after a few minutes he came upon another, almost identical. It was 9 feet away from the first. This apparently was the length of the stride which the giant had been in the habit of taking. Following the direction indicated by these 2 prints, Leeson found a number of others. They came to an end abruptly, which was not surprising, for their surroundings must have undergone tremendous changes since they were made. The mountain itself may have come into existence in that time. It is not surprising that footprints should have been preserved for so many ages. They may have been made in soft mud, which subsequently hardened and was then buried in the earth by volcanic action, and there turned into stone and preserved from injury until another volcanic disturbance brought them to daylight again. A large part of the knowledge of animals of early geological periods has been obtained from imprints left by them in this way. Leeson, it is said, has already set to work to chisel out the first footprint which he found. He intends to ensure public recognition as its discoverer. The existence of prehistoric giants on this continent has already been the subject of scientific discussion. The most important and interesting discovery tending to prove their existence was that of the Carson footprints. In 1868, Warden Batterman of the Nevada Penitentiary, while making excavations for the jail in a big bank of clay and metamorphite, came across certain tracks which were said by local scientists to be those of an extinct order of wading fowl. The next discovery was at a level of 16 feet below the surface, and consisted of the bones of a mastodon, most of which crumbled to dust on exposure to air, but some of which have been preserved. Next came the uncovering of footprints about which there was considerably more interest and discussion. All in all, there were hundreds of them, in parallel lines and crossing each other, and in shape, though certainly not in size. They looked like the imprints of human feet made in the soft clay many thousands of years earlier in the world's history, and preserved by the superincumbent metamorphite rock. By actual measurement, the impressions were found to range from 18 to 21 inches in length. The news of the uncovering of these gigantic footprints brought all the wise men of the West to Carson. With their advent came a bitter discussion as to the character of the track makers. Professor Leconte declared that the tracks were those of the great sloth, an arboreal monster which used to roam the Nevada wilds when they had forests instead of alkali wastes and sagebrush. Professor Harkness, on the other hand, was of the opinion that the footprints were those of a tribe of prehistoric men, and that their frequency in this locality showed that the old clay beds must have been a highway for the giants of a Neolithic age. Subsequent discoveries give a decided touch of realism to this hypothesis. As the excavations went on, other and still more gigantic footprints were discovered. These were of the mammoth whose bones had already been found, and about these mastodonic tracks those of the human-like character seemed to press. As there had been no discussion concerning the contemporaneous character of the tracks, it would follow, therefore, either that the sloths had held close and numerous companionship with the mammoth, against which there is the burden of natural history proof, or that the stone men of the Nevada plain had been tracking down the gigantic beast to give him battle for food, and had come upon their quarry here. The bones, despite their condition of decay, had given a fair idea of the huge bulbs of the mammoth, but these spoor furnished an object lesson of bulbs that was even more powerful. The prints were from 29 to 34 inches in diameter, the feet of an African elephant measuring from 12 to 16 inches in diameter, and where the great hairy pachyderm had trodden, the clay had risen in ridges a foot high. Here then the tree or cavemen, with their stone axes or obsidian-tipped arrows, had brought the mastodon to bay, and it would not need a great flight of the imagination to see the conflict between the men and beast, nor with the bones in such near neighborhood would it need very much more imagination to see how the battle ended. A strange addition to the actual realism of the scene is furnished by the testimony of the rocks themselves. Somewhat ahead of the massive tracks around the center of the hunting scene are found other prints of the big wading birds before alluded to. These show how the long-legged hunters of the pool first ran swiftly from the scene, and then, from the gradual shortening and deepening of the claw marks, how the big birds left the earth and took wing. Frightened from the salt marshes where they had been feeding by the rush and yells of the stone men and the trumpeting of the hunted mastodon. Man, when he appeared on the earth, had a great many unpleasant neighbors, and had he been the size indicated by the British Columbian footprint, he would have had plenty of opportunity to exercise his powers in combat. Among the animals then living were the hairy mammoth, which was much larger than the elephant, the woolly rhinoceros, the giant hippopotamus, as well as tigers, hyenas, and bears of great size and ferocity. The climate of the whole world was much colder, for the woolly pachyderms extended as far as the south of France. A remarkable similarity between the weapons and implements of primitive man has been noted all over the world. The stone hammers, axes, and so forth are alike in Europe, Asia, and America. From the remains of men of the Stone Age found in France, it is concluded that they had massive bones, long and flat feet, comparatively short arms and long forearms, with powerful muscles, greatly developed jaws, widely open nostrils, and were of unbridled passions. Professor Broca found the thigh bones in their width approaching those of the highest ape, and a remarkable transverse flattening of the tibia. The ascending branch of the lower jaw was very wide, and the cranial capacity equal to that of high races of the present day. Another archaeologist, M. Lartet, says that the man of the Stone Age lived without fruits, was essentially predaceous and carnivorous, an eater of raw flesh, and a cannibal. There is no scientific evidence to disprove the theory that gigantic races of men lived on the earth in the days of its infancy. The traditions of the most ancient of civilized peoples contain strong testimony that there were such races. Subheading and additional text. Dr. Binion tells how to build a prehistoric giant. It is easy to reconstruct from the footprint of this prehistoric man his entire form, according to the proportions of a modern man. An ordinary man 6 feet high has a foot about 12 inches in length. A man with a foot 29 inches long would be about 2.5 times as tall, or between 17 and 18 feet high. To the man 6 feet high, a weight of 200 pounds may be allowed. 2.5 times that would be 500 pounds. Add to this 1/3 for a proportionate increase in all directions, and you have a total of about 660 pounds. That would be the approximate weight of our prehistoric man. According to the same system of reckoning, he would have a brain weighing 125 ounces. That would give him large thinking powers. He would be about 100 inches round the chest, and would have biceps 18 inches in circumference. Corbett and Sullivan would be ridiculous pygmies compared to him. The average man's stride in walking is 2 feet. This prehistoric man would take 5 feet. A very fast professional runner can cover in the neighborhood of a mile in 5 minutes. The giant would perhaps be able to go 2.5 miles in 5 minutes. But many considerations enter into this question. He would have to overcome a great deal of friction. His capacity for eating would be tremendous. He could drink a gallon of wine and eat a whole sheep at a meal. The prehistoric people, however, did not eat as regularly as we do. They ate all they could get when they got it. They were great gourmands and very carnivorous, mighty eaters of flesh and fish. This giant would doubtless have needed 10 pounds of meat in a day. If he understood the art of brewing, he would have been able to drink a keg of beer. If he were as powerful as Sandow, in proportion to his size, he could have carried a bull under each arm. He could have broken in any modern doorway, and it would have required 6 or 7 of the strongest and most courageous policemen to arrest him. It is perhaps idle to base speculations on his strength on that of a modern man. It would probably be far greater in proportion to his size. The chimpanzee, which is somewhat smaller than a man, can twist a gun barrel with its hands, and is stronger than 2 or 3 men. It is reasonable to suppose that a prehistoric man, who lived almost as a wild animal, would have a strength proportionate to that of an ape. In that case, the giant would have had a truly fearful strength. It is curious to note that legends of races of giants have been more or less accepted in all ages. In the Bible are mentioned the Anakites, the last of whom, Og, the king of Bashan, was slain by Moses. Then there were the Cyclops of Greek mythology. Dr. Schliemann has discovered remains of gigantic buildings which lead him to believe in the actual existence of a Cyclopean race. S. A. Binion, Ph.D. The original article is from the New York Journal, a predecessor to the New York American, published on August 23, 1896. It does not appear to be freely available in major digital archives like Chronicling America at the Library of Congress, or newspaper.com based on searches. However, reproductions and transcriptions can be found on historical compilation sites focused on giant lore. And then there's a little bit more to it here. After the first article, it says, Leeson, it is said, has already set to work to chisel out the first footprint which he found. He intends to ensure public recognition as its discoverer. And it continues in the right-hand column with the Carson City footprints, comparisons to mammoths, etc., and ending with Dr. Binion's reconstruction, all of which is included in the earlier transcription. And then they have these tables. Heights of all the giants whom we know of. Ancient, Goliath, Palestine, 11 feet in 1063 BC. Galbara, Rome, 10 feet. Claudius Caesar is the age. Funum, or Funham, from Scotland, was 11 foot 5 inches. That was in the reign of Eugene II. De Valmont was from Rouen. He was 17 feet tall. This is the 14th century. Count Bouchard of Dauphiny, 22.6 feet tall. 16th century. This is Theotobacus, the one that we've heard of from other pieces. He was also found in Dauphiny at 25.5 feet high. That was also the 16th century. Unknown Palermo, 30 feet high in the 15th century. John Middleton, England, 9.3 AD 1578. Then we have modern. Frederick Sweden, 8 foot 4 inches, unknown period. Kujanis, or Kuhanis, Finland, 7 foot 9. Gilly from Tyrol, 8.1 feet. Patrick Cotter from Cork, 8.7 in 1806. Changao, Pekin, 7.8 feet in 1880.